last month, Disney Plus launched its streaming service in Hong Kong. And many eagle-eyed viewers will have noticed a glaring omission in The Simpsons, one of its episodes, which essentially mocks China, mocks the Tiananmen Square massacre or its absence. There's a sign that says nothing happened here in 1989, and makes fun of Mao Zedong's murderous reign, was missing from the service. So essentially what we seem to have here is a big Western company capitulating to China, not even being forced, but willingly censoring in advance to not upset the Chinese government. Charlie, what do you make of that?
I think it's not fair to say they're not being forced, because there is, I think, a history that they know that if they do it, they will be forced, and there is no...
An anticipation.
Yeah, there's a total anticipation of the force. They know that there is no stone that will be left unturned by those censors. God knows how many of them there are who are just peering through media that comes into the country. We just don't know the extent of that control. But obviously it's incredibly embarrassing. All right, it's embarrassing for us that the biggest cultural institutions that we have that we export to the world are so cowardly. I can understand in some cases that you don't export your nation's values to another one, right? And I think people always point out around one of the many Pride months that we have every year. It's essentially a 12-month thing these days, right?
Yeah.
Well, whenever some organization has its Pride month, the Europe Twitter account has a Pride flag, and then the Middle Eastern one doesn't, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is shocking. Where's their commitment to LGBT rights?" But they know full well that that would not be politically accepted in that country. So why put themselves at that huge disadvantage? That seems somewhat different to a political level of capitulation about just a joke about a country. It's so minute, but reveals the extent of the control over there.
And also, I mean, of course, Hong Kongers are not exactly unaware of the Tiananmen Square massacre. You know, they traditionally hold a vigil every year commemorating this. The Chinese government has cracked down on it under the guise of COVID measures the last couple of years. But it is quite a scary prospect, isn't it, Ella?
I think maybe you're being a little bit too soft on Disney, because I think it reveals the extent to which they are contradicting themselves and playing double standards in relation to their global persona. So the recent Marvel film Eternals came out, and it's got some kind of a character in it that there's a gay kiss or something. It's got some kind of LGBT character that they're very proud about, and Angelina Jolie and some of the other stars that were in the film made a big stink of celebrating Disney and Marvel for not refusing to cut those scenes when it was exported to audiences in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia and other places. And there was this kind of celebration of how Disney is so woke in a way that they were celebrating that they weren't going to capitulate to foreign censors. And then when it comes to the CCP, that all goes out the window. And the fact, and more importantly, there has been really no stink about it. There's been a couple of articles with commentators talking about it, but any of the people who are involved in Disney's production, or any of the people that are so proud to wear the pride flag and be right on when it's easy for them, I think, are being silent now. The double standards of the inability to criticize China, I think, is, as Brendan O'Neill mentioned in his column this week, one, it's a kind of commercial thing, because Disney doesn't want to lose out money to a massive audience of Chinese viewers, and so they're going to capitulate. And it's a reminder to everyone who cheers Ben and Jerry's for putting out kind of woke adverts, or gets behind BLM, the BLM announcement that Disney itself put out, that corporations are woke for cash. They are not. They're not kind of like ideological bastions that we should get behind. But I think also it's going to become more important as conversations about China and Chinese influence have to be dealt with, and with things that are taking place, like the persecution of the Uyghur Muslims, like the kind of bizarre situation that's happening around the disappearance or non-disappearance, or who knows, of this tennis star. People are going to have to start finding their backbone and criticising the CCP, even if it hurts them in the pocket. And we should if Disney wants us to cheer them for being woke when it comes to gay rights, they're going to have to expect to hold the same line when it comes to other issues.
I mean, Charlie, what do you make of the sort of contradiction here at the heart of this, where you have a company like Disney is, praising Black Lives Matter, and yet not only appeasing the CCP in this censorship instance, but also filmed a lot of its kind of live action Mulan remake in Xinjiang. The credits give thanks to many of the Xinjiang officials, and we all know what is going on there.
Right.
There is just this horrendous hypocrisy here, isn't there?
there is a hypocrisy. There's no doubt about it. But the core problem here, which I think has been largely brushed over in the conversation about the double standards towards China, is that I think there is a huge amount of anti-Asian racism among the domestic American politics, especially from the left, where Asian immigrants into the US have wildly outperformed their competitors. Essentially, you know, they do great on every life predictor of quality of life, education, health, expectancy, wealth. They smash it out of the park, and there is this, I think, quite insidious opposition to Asian success in America, and so many of these discussions about American culture overseas are a projection of domestic issues into the international sphere. And perhaps a lot of the cases, they just don't really think that Chinese people matter that much. They don't look at China and think, oh, those people need to be protected and supported, because at home they don't feel so strongly towards Asians in the US in the first place. You remember last year there was this huge discussion about anti-Asian violence in the States. The discussion that wasn't happening was that a lot of this anti-Asian violence was being perpetrated by black men who, you know, were unfortunately going through a summer where every action done by a black man was praised to the high heavens. And so you couldn't possibly break the narrative and point out that so much of this violence was being conducted by a social group that was being worshipped. And I think the BLM hypocrisy and the double standards, they exist, but at the same time, there is something much darker playing.
I suppose the other thing is that this kind of censorship is happening with other countries, even countries less powerful than China. So if you take the World Cup in Qatar, there is a lot less willingness to criticize that than there is willingness to criticize things going on domestically in the US or in the UK. I mean, it was quite telling. Gareth Southgate, I think it was last week, saying, you know, we'll all need to educate ourselves about the issues in Qatar. I mean, meaning we're not going to do anything about it, and we're not going to say anything about it, and we're not going to take the knee for that. Again, you know, someone like Enes Kanter, the NBA star, he first made his name in sort of politics for criticizing Erdogan, and Nike didn't want to sponsor him because essentially they knew it would be bad for business, even in Turkey. So there's even these like smaller kind of countries that big corporations will capitulate to, that we're expected to sort of allow censorship from. I mean, what do you make of that? So does that for me suggest that it's more cowardice than the power of any one nation or government?
Yeah, but I mean, you end up sounding cynical, but it is the case that cash is king, and it's usually about with the World Cup in particular, it's about conversations about that are not, you know, all the feelings about taking the knee at home and taking a stand and doing the right thing fall by the wayside when you're faced with mass revenue loss, or not being able to play. And I think people need to be more honest about that, which is that we live in a world where different countries have different views. And on the one hand, you want to be, I think, Charlie, you sort of alluded to this, you want to be, you know, not respectful in terms of like bowing down to stuff you don't agree with, but recognizing the fact that not everybody thinks the way we think in the West, let alone in the UK. And, you know, you can deal with that. That's part of being a tolerant person. But I think you step into a different kind of territory when you pretend that you want, it's kind of like soft power of the West. You pretend that you want to grandstand about all these views. And often, you know, we've had this in discussions that we've had in relation to Afghanistan or wars in the Middle East, where so often the West wants to look like it's exporting liberal and humanistic values abroad. But actually, when it comes down to real life examples of where they could make a stand or where they could say something serious, and particularly in relation to China, this is happening a lot. They lose their voice.